The transport ship entered the orbit of a forgotten mining world, its gray surface marked with scars of drills and explosions from a long time ago. To the human crew, it looked like another dead rock. They expected silence, dust, and the empty tunnels of an industry that had collapsed centuries before, but still Earth Command had sent them here. Strange signals had been detected, weak and broken, coming from beneath the surface. Captain Elias stood at the viewing deck as the planet turned slowly beneath him. His face was calm, but inside something restless stirred. He had seen many battlefields, many ruins, yet this world carried a strange weight. The scanners showed faint energy readings deep under the mines, like shadows trying to whisper. "Prepare landing team," Elias ordered. His voice carried the tone of someone who already expected trouble. The shuttle descended through dust storms and lightning that flashed across a yellow sky. The world greeted them with silence. No birds, no winds, no life. Only broken towers of rusted machinery reaching toward the clouds like the bones of giants. The landing crew stepped out, boots sinking into the ash-covered ground. Dr. Yara, the science officer, held a scanner in her hands. Her brow furrowed as she read the faint pulses. "The signals are here. They're coming from the mine shafts below, but it does not make sense. The frequency is too irregular. Almost like crying." The word froze the team for a moment. Crying on a dead world? They followed the path into the mines. Each step echoed through hollow tunnels carved centuries before by slaves who had long turned to dust. Rusted tracks for carts lay broken. Chains hung loose on the walls, clinking softly whenever the wind pushed through. The darkness seemed endless, swallowing the glow of their lamps. As they moved deeper, the scanner pulses grew louder. And then the faintest sound reached their ears. It was not metal. It was not machinery. It was soft, weak, and broken like a child's sob. The soldiers raised their rifles, nerves tense. This was impossible. No child could survive here. They pressed forward. The sound grew clearer. Whimpers, small voices, fear. When the tunnel opened into a wide chamber, their lights fell upon cages, dozens of them, rusted bars, chains, and broken locks. Inside were figures so small, so fragile, that at first the humans thought they were illusions. But then the figures moved. Small heads lifted, eyes wide and hollow, stared back at the humans with fear. Children. Not human children, but children from across the stars. Their skin came in shades of blue, green, gray, and pale white. Some had scales, some fur, some delicate feathers. All of them looked starved, thin, and broken. The silence of the landing team shattered. Gasps filled the chamber. A soldier whispered, "By God, who could do this?" Captain Elias knelt near one of the cages. A young alien child with silver eyes crawled closer, clutching the bars with weak fingers. The captain lowered his weapon and spoke softly. "It is all right. We are not here to hurt you." The child flinched but did not run. Behind him, dozens more eyes blinked, confused, afraid, but also filled with the smallest spark of hope. Dr. Yara scanned the children, her voice trembling. Malnourished. Bones fragile. They have been here for years, some of them for decades. She looked at Elias, horror in her eyes. "This is not random. Someone has been using this world as a prison. For children." The chamber grew colder with the weight of those words. One of the soldiers stepped forward. "Sir, what do we do? This is genocide." Elias's jaw tightened. He had seen war, blood, and fire, but never this. Never children locked in cages like animals. He stood tall, his voice heavy with rage that burned deep inside. "We take them out. All of them. And we find out who did this." The soldiers broke the locks and lifted the children carefully, wrapping them in thermal blankets. Some of the children cried, others stayed silent, too broken to understand freedom. But all of them clung to their rescuers, refusing to let go. As they carried them back through the tunnels, more cages were discovered. Hundreds, each one filled with young lives stolen from across the galaxy. Outside, as the shuttle engines roared to life, Elias looked at the horizon. The ruined machines, the empty skies, the silence of the world, all of it stood as a monument to cruelty. He knew this was only the beginning. Whoever had done this had not hidden one cage on one planet. This was bigger, darker, a network of chains spread across the stars, and humanity had just stepped into it. As the shuttle rose into the sky, the cries of freed children echoed in the cabin. Some were soft, some were broken, but some carried a strength that pierced through silence. It was the sound of survival. Captain Elias looked at them, then at his crew. "Send word to Earth," he ordered. His voice was low, steady, like thunder waiting to break. "Tell them what we found. Tell them we discovered the enslaved children." The crew stared at him, waiting. Elias's eyes hardened. "And tell them this galaxy will pay in fire and in vengeance." The transport ship carried its strange cargo back to Earth. Inside the medical bay, alien children lay on clean beds, wrapped in white blankets. Machines hummed softly, scanning their fragile bodies. Nurses moved carefully, whispering words of comfort they could not understand. But the tone itself calmed them. The children did not speak much. They stared with hollow eyes, too used to silence and pain. Some shook at sudden sounds. Others clung to the hands of human soldiers, refusing to let go. Every scar on their bodies told a story that words could not. When the ship reached Earth orbit, a crowd was already waiting. Scientists, leaders, journalists, all summoned by the urgent report Captain Elias had sent. Few believed it at first. Slavery was not new in the galaxy. It was whispered about, hidden in shadows, but no one had dared to imagine this. Children stolen from their worlds, locked away to rot in cages. The evidence arrived before them, breathing, crying, living. In the council chamber, Elias stood at the center. Behind him, a large screen showed recordings from the mine tunnels. Rows of cages, small figures pressing against bars, the sound of weak sobs echoing in the dark. The chamber was silent. Not one leader spoke. Not one dared to interrupt. Finally, Dr. Yara's voice broke the silence. She stepped forward, holding up a datapad filled with medical reports. "These children come from more than 30 different species. None of them were reported missing by their governments. Their world said nothing, their council said nothing." She raised her eyes, filled with cold fury. "Which means they already knew, or chose to ignore it." The words hit like a blade. The chamber stirred, whispers spreading. But no one denied it. Elias's gaze swept over the leaders of alien worlds who sat in their tall seats, wrapped in fine robes and glowing emblems. He had fought alongside some of them in past battles, had called them allies, but now he saw only cowards. Who was responsible? He demanded. His voice echoed. No one answered. On the screen, the face of a child appeared. The silver-eyed boy who had first reached for Elias in the cage. His voice was weak, translated through machines, but his words carried a weight heavier than any fleet. "They wore the mark of fire. They took us. They laughed when we cried, the mark of fire, a symbol known across the stars, the sigil of the Crimson Dominion, the empire of slavers. Ruthless, feared, and untouchable. For centuries they had traded in flesh, building their power on suffering, and for centuries the galaxy had bowed in silence. Now the silence filled the chamber once again. The leaders of great civilizations lowered their eyes. No one spoke against the Dominion. No one dared. Elias felt his jaw tighten. His fist closed at his side. He had seen soldiers die with honor. He had seen battles lost with dignity. But this was worse than war. This was the murder of innocence, and the galaxy had watched without raising a voice. He turned to the humans present, military officers, scientists, ordinary men and women who had come to witness. "We cannot ignore this," Elias said. His tone was steady, each word a stone. "These children are proof. Not just of slavery, not just of cruelty, but of cowardice. The galaxy fears the Dominion, so they closed their eyes. They buried the truth." He pointed at the screen where the cages flickered. "We will not close ours." The chamber erupted. Alien leaders shouted, some begging for caution, others whispering fear. "Do not start a war you cannot win," one cried. "The Dominion's fleets are endless," another warned. Elias did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He simply said, "This is not war. This is justice." Dr. Yara stepped beside him. "And justice begins with truth." She activated the broadcast system. Suddenly, every screen across Earth lit up with the same images. The cages, the children, the scars. News stations picked it up, spreading it beyond Earth, beyond human space. In hours, billions of eyes across the galaxy saw the truth. Silence could no longer hold. In distant worlds, citizens of alien empires gasped, cried, and raged as they saw their young stolen. Riots began in cities where people shouted for answers. Soldiers deserted from armies too cowardly to act. The galaxy stirred, a storm breaking the chains of fear. The Crimson Dominion responded with threats. Their warlords spoke through fire-lit broadcasts. promising destruction for those who dared accuse them. But humans did not answer with fear. Instead, Earth prepared its fleets. Elias stood on the deck of the dreadnought Iron Will, watching as hundreds of ships aligned across the void. Each one bore the symbol of Earth. Each one carried men and women ready to fight, not for conquest, not for riches, but for children who had no voice. Before departure, Elias spoke to his crew. His voice was calm, cold, yet filled with fire. The galaxy stayed silent, but we will not. The Dominion believes no one dares to touch them. They are wrong. From this day forward, their chains will burn. Every cage will be broken. Every child will see the stars again. The crew roared, their voices shaking the steel walls, and far away in hidden worlds, the slavers prepared. But they had no idea what was coming, for Earth had chosen vengeance, and vengeance was already moving through the stars. The fleet moved in silence. Hundreds of human warships drifted like shadows across the stars, their hulls painted black, their engines muted to hide their presence. At the center stood the dreadnought Iron Will, its massive form like a floating fortress. On the command deck, Captain Elias stared at the star map projected before him. Red marks showed enemy slave markets spread across Dominion space. Each one was a world of chains, each one a wound on the galaxy. The target chosen for the first strike was not small. It was a planet called Kaor, a hub of the slave trade where auctions were held in vast stadiums. Billions of credits flowed through its markets every year. It was the pride of the Dominion. And it would be the place where humanity delivered its first message. Jump complete, the navigator reported. We are inside Dominion territory. The stars outside shifted as the fleet emerged from the void. Before them hung Kaor, a glowing world of gold and crimson lights wrapped in defense stations and patrol fleets. To the Dominion, it was untouchable. To humans, it was the perfect place to strike. Elias gave no speech. His crew did not need words now. They knew why they were here. They had seen the children in cages. They had heard the silence of the galaxy. They carried the weight of it inside them, and it was heavier than fear. Begin the assault, Elias ordered. The sky lit up with fire. Human warships unleashed their weapons with precision, not on cities, not on homes, but on the slave markets, the fortresses, the chains. Plasma bolts ripped through defense stations. Missiles shattered patrol fleets before they could even form ranks. The Dominion was caught unprepared. They had always ruled through terror. They believed no one would dare touch Kaor. But now their great pride burned. On the planet's surface, crowds screamed as the markets exploded. The cages, filled with thousands of enslaved lives, cracked open as human dropships descended. Soldiers in black armor stormed the auction halls, tearing down slavers who tried to fight. Chains were cut. Doors were broken. One soldier, Sergeant Hale, found himself in a vast chamber where hundreds of children were being held, waiting to be sold. The moment they saw the humans, the children panicked, unsure if this was rescue or another kind of cruelty. Hale dropped his weapon to the floor, raised his empty hands, and said softly, "You are safe now. No one will hurt you again." The fear in their eyes shifted. Slowly, cautiously, small hands reached toward him. Then all at once the children rushed forward, clinging to him, to his armor, to the promise of safety. Hale's throat tightened as he lifted them into his arms. For the first time in years, they were not slaves. Above, the battle raged. Dominion warlords screamed over comms, calling in reinforcements. But every ship that arrived fell to the human fleet. The Iron Will moved like a beast through the fire, tearing enemy cruisers apart with railgun salvos. Across the galaxy, billions watched. The humans had broadcast everything: the destruction of the slave markets, the liberation of the enslaved, the burning of the Dominion's pride. The message was clear. Humanity had declared war on chains. On Kaor, the final stronghold was the high auction spire, a towering building where the richest slavers gathered to sell lives like toys. Elias himself led the landing team. He entered the spire with soldiers at his side. The walls dripped with luxury, golden floors, glowing statues, silk curtains. Yet all of it smelled of rot, the wealth of suffering. At the top of the spire, the Dominion's high masters waited. Their robes were crimson, their crowns heavy with jewels. They sneered when the humans burst in as if the very idea of being attacked was a joke. "You dare," one of them roared. "You are nothing." "Do you know who we are?" Elias raised his rifle, his eyes cold. "Yes," he said. "You are slavers. The masters tried to fight, tried to summon guards, but none could stop what came next." Human fire tore through the chamber. The slavers who had once ruled in fear fell screaming to the floor. When it was over, Elias stood before the great window of the spire. Outside, the skies of Kaor burned. Slave ships fell like meteors. Chains cracked open across the city. And in the distance, the people who had been enslaved raised their voices in cries of freedom. Elias spoke into the recorder. His message carried across every channel. His words were sharp, clear, and final. "This is not the beginning of war. This is the beginning of justice. Wherever there are chains, we will break them. Wherever there are children in cages, we will come." The Dominion thought the galaxy would stay silent. They were wrong. Humanity is not silent. Humanity is fire. The message spread like a storm. Across distant worlds, enslaved people whispered the word Earth with hope. In Dominion palaces, rulers trembled. Kaor, the jewel of the slave trade, had fallen in a single strike, and humanity promised it was only the first. The fall of Kaor sent a shockwave across the galaxy. News traveled faster than ships. Images of human soldiers breaking cages, of enslaved children crying in freedom, of Dominion markets burning spread on every world. For the first time in centuries, the chains of the Crimson Dominion trembled. On hidden planets, slaves whispered stories of the strike. On rich worlds, Dominion rulers shouted for vengeance. And in the halls of galactic councils, leaders who once stayed silent could no longer pretend nothing had happened. Humanity had forced the galaxy to look into the mirror of its own cowardice. But humans did not wait for approval. They moved again. The fleet split into strike groups. Each one carried soldiers, medics, and firepower enough to crush small empires. Their orders were simple: seek out the slave worlds, destroy the markets, and free the children. The war spread like wildfire. On the desert world of Drakor, human marines stormed a fortress where thousands of chained workers had mined crystal for Dominion warships. The sky turned red as the fortress walls fell, and the workers looked up in disbelief when strange voices shouted, "You are free." On the frozen mines of Valtor, human engineers cut through ice cages where small alien children lay half-frozen, barely breathing. Soldiers wrapped them in heat blankets, whispering soft words. For the first time in years, those children felt warmth. On the swamp planet Mirza, the Dominion tried to fight. Their fleets gathered to crush the humans. But when they faced Earth's warships, the battle lasted only hours. Human missiles cut through their defenses like knives. When the smoke cleared, the Dominion fleet was gone, and every prison camp on Mirza lay in ruins. The galaxy watched in awe and fear. For every cage broken, 10 more slaves rose up in rebellion. For every Dominion stronghold burned, whispers of freedom spread. Aliens who had once lowered their heads now lifted them. Species who had lived in fear for generations began to take up arms, not for conquest but for freedom. It was no longer just humanity's war. It was becoming something greater, but the Dominion did not remain silent. In their capital of Vear, the high warlords gathered in dark chambers lit by fire. Their voices shook with rage. Humans must be broken. Their worlds must burn. They dare to shame us before the galaxy! They unleashed fleets larger than any humanity had ever faced. Whole armadas moved through space seeking to crush the human fire. They attacked colonies, destroyed outposts, and left trails of ash. The Dominion believed they could terrify Earth into silence, just as they had silenced every other world before. But humanity did not break. On the command deck of the Iron Will, Captain Elias received the reports one after another. Enemy fleets moving, Dominion warlords screaming threats. He stood in silence for a long moment, then said simply, "Good, let them come. Every ship they send we will tear apart. Every world they rule we will burn their chains." The crew answered with steel in their voices. They were tired, wounded, but their resolve only grew stronger. They knew they carried not only the strength of Earth, but also the hope of billions who had never dared to dream of freedom. The war turned into a storm. Stars across the Dominion's territory burned as human fleets clashed with their armadas. Battles raged for days, filling the void with wreckage and fire. But the humans fought with a fury no enemy could match. They were not here for glory, not for conquest. They fought for children, for voices too small to defend themselves. On the world of Serene, a great battle ended with flames across the sky. Dominion ships fell like meteors, and when the smoke cleared, Human soldiers marched through broken gates carrying young prisoners out of their cages. The sight of children lifted on human shoulders spread across the galaxy. It was no longer just war. It was a story the galaxy could not unsee, and so rebellions ignited. On worlds once ruled by fear, chains were broken by slaves who had watched the humans fight. "If Earth can stand against the Dominion, so can we," they whispered. Cities rose in flames as the oppressed turned against their masters. Dominion troops found themselves fighting not only humans, but the very people they had enslaved for centuries. The Crimson Dominion began to fracture. Their warlords grew desperate. They unleashed cruelty with even greater rage, but the more they struck, the more the galaxy resisted. Humanity's fire had spread too far to be stopped. Elias watched it unfold from the bridge of the Iron Will. His face was hard, his eyes burning. "This is no longer just our fight," he told his crew. "This is the galaxy rising, and we will carry the torch until the last chain is broken." The galaxy had thought Earth was small, weak, unimportant, but now every star echoed with the same truth. Humanity had become the fire that no one could put out, and with every new victory, the war drew closer to its heart, the capital of the Dominion itself. There, behind walls of fleets and armies, the high warlords waited. But Elias and his fleet were coming, and they would not stop until the throne of slavery burned. The war had spread like fire through dry forests. World after world rose against the Crimson Dominion. Chains cracked, cages fell, and the voices of the enslaved grew louder than the Dominion's war drums. Yet still, at the center of their empire, the high warlords held their throne. Vear, the Dominion's capital, was a fortress built from cruelty. Its skies burned with defense grids. Its orbit bristled with fleets, endless lines of warships forged through centuries of blood. Billions of slaves worked in its factories, building weapons for masters who treated them as shadows. The warlords believed no one could touch them. They believed fear would protect them. But fear had already broken. On the bridge of the dreadnought Iron Will, Captain Elias stood in silence. Around him, the crew prepared for what might be their final battle. The fleet was smaller now. Ships lost in battles across the stars, but their spirit burned brighter than ever. Each one carried survivors, children, and freed slaves who had chosen to fight beside humans. The star map glowed red with Dominion fleets. It was a sea of enemies. Dr. Yara studied the scans, her voice low. "They outnumber us more than 10 to 1. Elias did not move. His gaze was fixed on the enemy capital. "Good," he said quietly. "Then none of them will escape." The order was given. The human fleet surged forward, the void erupted in fire. Dominion armadas clashed with human warships, their weapons screaming across the black. Explosions lit the skies of Vear, turning night into day. The Dominion fought with desperation, unleashing wave after wave of ships, but the humans fought with something greater. They fought for the children they had carried from cages. They fought for every cry that still haunted their dreams. On the surface of Vear, dropships descended through storms of fire. Human soldiers landed in shattered streets, moving through factories where slaves worked under chains. The soldiers tore down gates, broke locks, and freed thousands as battles raged around them. For the first time, the city of chains echoed not with silence, but with the roar of rebellion. Elias himself led the assault on the throne spire, the towering black fortress where the high warlords ruled. Its walls stretched into the clouds, glowing with crimson light. For centuries it had stood as a symbol of terror. Now it shook with the thunder of human fire. The gates shattered. Human soldiers stormed inside, fighting through halls lined with statues of Dominion rulers. Every step was heavy with history, but none of it mattered now. What mattered was the end. At the top of the spire, the warlords waited. They were dressed in armor of gold and fire, their eyes burning with hatred. They believed themselves gods among mortals. One of them shouted as Elias entered. "You dare invade Vear? You dare touch the throne of the galaxy?" Elias raised his rifle, but his words cut sharper than bullets. "No, I dare to end it." The battle inside the throne chamber was brutal. Dominion guards fought with savage fury, but human soldiers cut through them, their rage unstoppable. Freed slaves joined the fight, turning on the masters who had once beaten them. The chamber filled with screams, fire, and the sound of chains breaking. At last, Elias stood before the warlords. Their crowns lay shattered. Their robes burned. They were no longer gods, only men drowning in fear. "You thought silence would protect you," Elias said, his voice low, heavy with judgment. "But silence is broken. The galaxy has seen you." The warlords begged, threatened, screamed, but none of it mattered. Humanity's answer came in fire. When it was over, the throne of slavery was nothing but ash. The crimson banners fell, burning to dust. Outside, the skies of Vear blazed with fire. Dominion fleets fell one by one, their wreckage raining across the world. But the cries that filled the air were not of fear. They were of freedom. Children who had once been silent now shouted, running through broken gates. Slaves lifted their chains high, then threw them into flames. The sound of freedom roared louder than war. On the bridge of the Iron Will, Elias watched as the Dominion's last defenses collapsed. His face remained calm, but inside he felt the weight of every life they had saved and every soldier they had lost. Dr. Yara stood beside him. "It is over," she whispered. Elias shook his head. "No, it is beginning." She looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" He turned from the burning world on the screen. "Today we destroyed the Dominion, but tomorrow there will be others. Someone will always try to build chains, and when they do, they must remember this day. They must remember what happens when you touch the children of the galaxy." Silence filled the bridge, heavy, eternal. Then one by one, the crew lowered their heads in respect. Across the galaxy, the story spread. The day Earth burned the Dominion, the day chains shattered. The day children saw the stars again. Humanity did not claim thrones, lands, or crowns. They left behind only two things: freedom for the enslaved and fire for those who built chains. And the galaxy would never forget it.